Thank you, BJ, and good morning. I think it's still morning, right? On Washington time, it'd be the afternoon. I'm really pleased to be here with you all, and I'm always glad to be back in Colorado. And in particular, I'm so interested in spending some time with those of you who are dedicated to the defense of our nation. I want to cover a wide-ranging set of topics, hopefully in a succinct and consolidated way. Hope there's some time for a few questions and comments from all of you here, because there's such great expertise in this audience and here in the Springs in general. I did want to also recognize Don Addy, who's been a friend and a colleague and an advisor to me in my service, not only in the Senate today, but in the House of Representatives over these last years as I've served on the House Armed Services Committee. Also General Eberhardt, and all the many other distinguished members of the NHDF. It's certainly fitting that we're here on Veterans Day. It's not only a time to honor the fallen, but to thank the veterans among us. I didn't serve in uniform, although my father and my uncle did. They were part of what we call the greatest generation, the veterans who saved Europe and the world from Nazism and fascism. And I think for many of you, this is a day where you think about those members of your family, either immediate or far, and the role model that they presented. I think about my dad, for example. He had lost an eye in a childhood accident, and through basically cheating on the eye test, he got himself enlisted in the Army. He was kicked out briefly, but then of course every able-bodied individual is necessary in that important fight, and he served in the Army during World War II. My uncle, Stuart, who's still alive, we're going to honor him later this week down in Arizona. He's pushing that marvelous age of 90. He was a ball turret gunner in the bombing fleet in Europe, and he took part in over 40 missions. The one mission when he was in the nose turret, the gunner who took his place in the belly turret was killed by a piece of flak instantly. My uncle never talked about his service unless he was asked. He just did what his duty. And I think we think of all of those veterans who then served in Korea and Vietnam, the first Gulf War, and today, of course, in Iraq and Afghanistan. When historians and politicians will endlessly debate the conduct and the causes of war, but I think there's no debate. There's just no debate that anybody who lays down their life for their fellow citizens is a hero. And there are many, many heroes in our state of Colorado. We're home to those individuals who so inspire us. We're also home here in Colorado to many vital military installations and national defense programs that keep America safe. From the soldiers from the 4th ID at Fort Carson to the airmen at the Space Command at Schriever and Peterson Air Force Bases to the aviators patrolling the skies out of Buckley Air Force Base, it's difficult to find a place in the country that can boast a stronger commitment to the armed services. Now, these installations in our Homeland Security system are part of a defense structure that's more critical than ever. And that's because, and I don't have to tell you this, we face external threats from traditional nation states like Iran and North Korea, and internal threats by non-state actors in the form of terrorist networks like Al-Qaeda. Much of our attention has been justifiably focused on Iraq and Afghanistan. And our troops have been serving there, and this is quite a list, as warriors, diplomats, engineers, community planners, mediators, and peacekeepers, often in the course of a single day. And they've done so with incredible skill and valor and determination. I visited Afghanistan and Pakistan earlier this year and had the chance to visit with our troops in Afghanistan. I also had a chance to meet with various government officials, both in those Afghan and Pakistani governments, but our officials there. And it's clear that while we're making progress, we have a hard road ahead of us in that region of the world. As we await an announcement from the President on any changes in our strategy in Afghanistan, I've been meeting on an ongoing basis with national security experts, active duty military leaders, and others to deepen my understanding of our strategic options in this crucial part of the world. I'm increasingly, I want to underline this, of the view that the debate between counterinsurgency and counterterrorism is a false one. We need a strategy that combines both. And I'm committed as a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee to ask the right questions and support a strategy that advances our national security. Now, while our troops find, fix, and destroy al-Qaeda and Taliban elements in the mountains of Afghanistan and work to provide security in Iraq, we face a quieter but no less deadly threat right here at home. A few weeks ago, in our state of Colorado, FBI agents arrested a young man, Najibullah Zazi, charging him with conspiring to manufacture and detonate homemade bombs here in the United States. His arrest was the result of a carefully planned and well-executed operation that will likely remain highly classified. Zazi's arrest is an uncomfortable reminder that we cannot be complacent 8 years after 9/11. It's also a reminder that, like our troops fighting overseas, the Department of Homeland Security and federal law enforcement officers are on the front lines against terrorism. And that includes the men and women in our immigration, customs, and border enforcement agencies. These people don't seek fame, and they probably will never march down Broadway in a homecoming parade, but their service and personal sacrifice cannot be overstated. They were able to develop informants, acquire actionable intelligence, analyze data, and make arrests without a shot being fired. The Zazi case is a prime example of the work that our Homeland Security agents do every day, and it's vital that we continue to provide them with the resources that they need. The Senate may address some of these resources later this year through a reauthorization of expiring provisions of the Patriot Act. Now, some of you may know I opposed the original Patriot Act because I believed it went too far in stretching the limits of the Bill of Rights. In 2005, Congress reauthorized the Patriot Act, but provided additional oversight measures and sunsets on some of the surveillance provisions that I believe had the greatest potential for government abuse of constitutional rights and civil liberties. 3 of these provisions are scheduled to expire at the end of this year. The Senate Judiciary Committee has reported out bipartisan legislation on roving wiretaps, orders for business records, and the lone wolf provision, and imposes a new 4-year sunset on the use of national security letters. It also strengthens oversight and judicial review. Now, I want to move to Fort Hood because it's on my mind, but I wanted to just end by saying on the Patriot Act, I'm going to read carefully the legislation before it comes to the full Senate, and I know we can find practical ways to ensure that our constitutional rights are protected while taking the steps necessary to defend our country against 21st century threats. I pause as I think about the tragic events at Fort Hood last week, and it's a reminder that we face threats from within, as I said when I began my remarks. My Armed Services Committee colleagues and I have received detailed briefings from the Army about the shooting, and I'm confident that the CID and the FBI will determine exactly what happened and what led to this horrific act of violence. We do not yet know all the facts behind what happened at Fort Hood. Was it an act of domestic terrorism based in religious extremism, or an isolated case by a terribly disturbed human being? Was the shooter a jihadist or a jihadist wannabe? When the facts are in, we may find that all of these elements are true. Whatever the case, it appears that important warning signs were missed. We must answer the victims and their families at Fort Hood with a full investigation. Most importantly, this investigation should be about facts and not politics. Lessons from Fort Hood will hopefully guide us, and I would like to say will guide us, must guide us to a more effective strategy in apprehending dangerous people and preventing attacks in the future. Let me turn to the global environment, if I might. On the global scale, we continue to face threats and challenges from other nations and organizations not directly affiliated with foreign governments. Radical Islamic jihadists continue to spread their violence. American Special Forces operators recently destroyed a terrorist training site and killed senior al-Qaeda leaders in Somalia, a country in name only, without any semblance of a functional central government. That lawlessness allows warlords to maintain control over large portions of that country and creates conditions that are ripe for the recruitment and indoctrination of potential terrorists. Similar conditions exist throughout parts of Indonesia, Pakistan, Western Africa, and Southwest Asia. Part of securing our homeland includes breaking the cycle of hopelessness, despair, and ignorance that makes young men vulnerable to the influence of radicals who would use them as human bombs. In New York, Washington, Tanzania, Saudi Arabia, Bali, and Kenya, we've been made all too aware that a small contingent of determined terrorists can inflict terrible casualties and rattle our sense of security to the core. Without a determined effort to disrupt the conditions that create terrorists, we cannot hope to prevail with military superiority alone. Against this challenge, a number of traditional nation states have also declared their hostile intent toward us and our allies. Iran and North Korea are working to develop nuclear weapons and delivery systems capable of reaching Europe and North America. With regard to Iran, there are no easy answers. We've seen Tehran making significant advancements in its ostensible civilian nuclear program, which could lead to the production of highly enriched uranium. We're still waiting for Tehran's reaction to an IAEA proposal to have Iran export its low-enriched uranium for processing, which could ease global fears over its nuclear program. Now, our leading officials have suggested that Iran doesn't have much more time to consider this deal before the international community launches a renewed push for sanctions. In the past few weeks, committees in both the Senate and the House have passed sanctions legislation that would punish foreign companies that sell refined gasoline to Iran and would ban most trade between the two countries. While our options are limited in Iran, I think the Obama administration has been right in organizing international pressure. We're going to need to keep our deep resolve to convince Iran that it cannot continue on a path of belligerence. Our military strength, our diplomatic skill, and our strategy in the region beyond Iran's borders are all part of this difficult but necessary puzzle. Let me turn to a threat that increasingly all of us in this room know is real, even though it exists in the world of virtual reality, if you will. We know that there's a significant cyber threat that threatens our nation's vital information infrastructure. Our intelligence community has warned that some nations have the technical capability to target our information systems for intelligence collection and potentially in the process to degrade or destroy our intelligence systems that are critical to our commercial and national security. Secretary Gates noted when he approved the creation of U.S. Cyber Command in June 2009, our increasing dependency on cyberspace alongside a growing array of cyber threats and vulnerabilities adds a new element of risk to our national security. I share his belief that we must take immediate and forceful steps to ensure that our cyber infrastructure is protected from threats both external and internal. That U.S. Cyber Command is led by a four-star general demonstrates that network infrastructure is understood to be as important to national security as the protection of our borders, our airspace, and our interests overseas. We've already seen from recent attacks on American and South Korean government sites that cybersecurity must be viewed as a national priority. We rely on our networks for communications, data storage, and information management, and attacks on those resources should be viewed in the same light as kinetic attacks against our vital interests. Although we have come to rely heavily on network-based assets for so many civilian and military applications, that technology is relatively new and will require a concerted effort to develop security measures that can keep pace with the fantastic rate of technological advancement and corresponding reliance on network-based systems that we've seen over the past decade. At the ground level, I'm going to turn here to being a full-on homer because I'm going to talk about UCCS. It's clear that we have to work to create more Homeland Security expertise, and we've seen a lot of forward thinking right here in Colorado Springs and at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. UCCS has begun to offer graduate certificates in Homeland Defense, Security Intelligence, and Disaster Health. The partnerships that Dr. Pam Shockley-Zalabek has developed with U.S. Northcom, the Air Force Academy, and other federal agencies place UCCS in a unique position to serve as a center of excellence for modern security studies. In short, UCCS is developing the next generation of Homeland Security experts. And I can't think of another place in the country that provides comparable access to technology, leadership, and expertise for graduate students. And I want to thank General Renuart and other military leaders for their foresight and dedication to this important effort and programs. Our military commands here in Colorado have established this region as the home of domestic defense. We're extremely proud of the essential work that's done by the Air Force Space Command units stationed at Peterson, Buckley, and Schriever. Their mission to provide an integrated constellation of space and cyberspace capabilities at the speed of need brilliantly captures the reality of on-demand 21st century operations. The Missile Defense Integration Operations Center at Schriever maintains uninterrupted surveillance of the world's skies and space to detect, track, and destroy missile threats from anywhere on the Earth. U.S. Northcom, headquartered at Peterson, has successfully integrated military and civilian assets to protect the people of the United States, Canada, and Mexico from military and terrorist threats, national disasters, and a host of other contingencies. Northcom and NORAD work quietly but constantly to secure our skies, our seas, and our communities. Let me turn to energy. Our national energy security is also deeply connected to our energy policies. We import most of our oil, and has been noted by many colleagues on both sides of the aisle, many of the countries that provide us with oil imports don't really like us all that much. And my friend and former CI director, Jim Woolsey, put it well when he said, "Except for our own civil war, this is the only war that we have fought where we are paying for both sides. We pay Saudi Arabia $160 billion annually for its oil, and $3 or $4 billion of that goes to Wahhabis who teach children to hate. We're paying for these terrorists with our SUVs." I'm not opposed to SUVs, by the way. I'd like to see more of them run on natural gas, but that's maybe a topic for some questions when I conclude. But my point is that we can't fuel our economy or provide for our national defense without a different energy policy, one that promotes the natural gas, domestic resources, and renewable sources like wind and solar power. And I've been really inspired because some of the wisest and greatest advocates for sustainable energy are in the Pentagon and on military bases around the country. Last month I had the honor of endorsing the work being done by the members of Operation Free. This is a group of Iraq and Afghanistan vets that are working to support energy independence. One of their leaders is General Gordon Sullivan, the former Chief of Staff of the Army. And regarding the threats of climate change, General Sullivan notes, "Military professionals are accustomed to making decisions during times of uncertainty. Even if you don't have complete information, you still need to take action. Waiting for 100% certainty during a crisis can be disastrous." The U.S., he concludes by saying, has the responsibility to lead on global climate change. If we don't make changes, then others won't. Our military has taken that message to heart and is implementing sweeping policies that will drastically reduce the consumption of fossil fuels. In Iraq, where over 50% of fuel consumption is expended to electrical generators, alternative electrical systems will save lives by reducing the need for fuel convoys that are exposed to IEDs and ambushes. As we speak, engineers are installing spray foam insulation in tents in existing buildings to reduce the demand for air conditioning in the brutal heat of summer and the brutal cold of winter in both Iraq and Afghanistan. At home, installations are deploying solar panels and wind turbines to cut their fossil fuel usage. And it's not just Al Gore who's worried about the planet. Our own very Air Force Academy is committed to becoming carbon neutral by 2030. As in so many cases where positive change is taking place, our military is leading the way. We live in extraordinary times, filled not only with deep challenge, but I believe with great opportunities. We're coming to understand, for example, that addressing our need for energy problems will not only help us meet our national security needs, but it will strengthen our economy. A stronger America also obviously means tighter borders, a well-resourced Department of Homeland Security, and maintaining the best equipped and trained military in the world. But it also means an economically prosperous nation with an educated and healthy workforce. A stronger America will also hinge on how we treat each other in defense of our freedom. And in the spirit of bipartisan respect that I try hard to emulate in public life, let me close with one of my favorite presidential quotes. Ronald Reagan said, "Above all, we must realize that no arsenal or no weapon in the arsenals of the world is so formidable as the will and moral courage of free men and women." It is a weapon our adversaries in today's world do not have. Thank you for giving me a chance to appear before you here. I look forward to your questions and comments. Thank you very, very much.